All right, if you're considering getting a fence, you're probably wondering how long it's going to take until you can get a fence. So there's basically two things. The first one is the lead time, which is basically how long from the time you book your job until you can actually have the fence installed. And the other one is the installation time, which is basically, when the crew shows up, how long does it take from start to finish to install your fence? So first we'll go with the install time. So the installation time it really depends on the property, but it can be anywhere, depending on the size of the job and the ground conditions and everything else, I would say anywhere from an average of 1 day up until about 4 days. And again, this really depends on how large the job is, as well as the ground conditions. Because there are some townships where the ground's great and there's no problems and everything just goes nice and smoothly. But then there's other townships, or it could even be in the same township, but just a different property. And what we'll find is the ground composition is completely different. So you go from a nice soil to something like a nice, well, not nice, but a thick clay. Mullica Hill's really good for this. And basically, if we're installing a fence in the summertime and it's clay and it's been dry for a while, it's basically like digging through concrete. So yes, we can get everything in, but the problem is it takes a lot longer to install. The other thing is, if we're installing in townships like Haddonfield, something like that, then some properties we might be okay. Like the digging is okay, but the problem we come across is the roots. Now the roots could, depending on the severity of the size and everything else, it could, be as little as 10 minutes to get through a root. But there's been times where it's taken like 2 hours. So, if we're working, an 8-hour shift, that's 25% of our time to get through one hole. And now if you have like 20 holes, obviously it's going to take, a pretty long time. So anyway, long story short, about 1 to 4 days. Now, what is the actual lead time between the time that you book your fence and then the time you actually get installed? Now, that really depends as well, and especially for the time of year, and because of COVID, that kind of throws everything out the window as well. Now, typically for the lead time, we're at a minimum of, in the wintertime, 3 to 4 weeks, but then in the spring and the summer, it could be anywhere from 6 weeks to 8 weeks or even longer, depending. And then if you haven't watched the other videos, if you're picking some special order materials, such as special aluminum or different colors in vinyl, it could be well into the several months before you can have your fence installed, just because with COVID, everything is being held up at this point. So what used to take like 3 to 4 weeks for special orders to come in, now it's taking like 6 to 12 weeks for that. And then same thing with the colored vinyl. That used to, be able to get that pretty quickly. Now there's some colors, like the darker khaki color that we have, it's been about 6 months. And we're hoping that finally comes back in, but at this point, there's just no guarantee, because the manufacturers are focusing all their time and attention on the standard materials, which basically at this point is 6-foot solid weight vinyl, and then 54-inch black pull coat aluminum.